Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short. I'm glad to have you along for our program today. Today we're going to be talking about something that just occurred fairly recently. It was last week, and this channel received a strike from YouTube. As you can see here, it says, YouTube removed your content. And if you go down further, it talks about how YouTube removed a program that I posted on Christian Answers entitled Book Review of the 2020 Election Book Rigged by Molly Hemingway. This is a book that you can buy off of Amazon.com. This is a mainstream media book. You can purchase this at your bookstores. This is not an extremist. This is not a radical fringe book. This is an objective journalistic look at the 2020 election. And YouTube didn't want an objective journalistic look at the 2020 election. They decided that they were going to remove this content. So we'll get into that later. But this is not the first time that I have had a program removed from YouTube because of violating their terms of service. About a year ago, I was having a discussion on my internet channel about the vaccines and what went into making those vaccines. And lo and behold, nothing radical, nothing fringy, nothing really that far out. A pretty balanced discussion. I actually was reviewing an article that was written online by an actual hospital or medical center. And evidently YouTube at that point, a year ago, didn't want any information or discussions about the virus vaccines disseminated, except the very narrow party line, mainstream liberal narrative that YouTube endorses. They only wanted that one put out for the public. Now, what's so strange about this is that I am a small content creator. I am not a huge content creator. The biggest one, for example, right now is Joe Rogan, and he gets 20 million, I guess, views on his videos, and he's the biggest podcaster in the world, as far as I know, outside of just some frivolous, funny, comedic, really silly videos. Like, I think the biggest actual YouTube programmer is PewDiePie, so-called PewDiePie, a Scandinavian broadcaster who just does hijinks and jokes and makes fun of things, and it's more of an entertainment program. Well, Joe Rogan actually brings people in and discusses topics and gets all points of views, and so he's the most popular podcaster right now in the world. And so he's becoming under fire now by the mainstream media and the liberal democratic left because he is not following their mainstream media narrative, and he's not confining himself to their narrow message about how things should be discussed and what answers should be put forth. And they don't like his discussions with people because they don't follow the guidelines of the mainstream media narrative and the liberal Democrats and the Joe Biden administration and the radical activists. He doesn't follow their narrative. And so they're trying to cancel him right now. They're trying to remove him from his big platform on Spotify. And so this is not just a problem with small content creators. It's a problem with large content creators and everyone in between. But the funny thing is, why would YouTube go after me? I'm a small content creator. In other words, I don't have a huge following. I don't have a huge amount of traffic to my site. I am distributing my programs on cable television, local cable television. I'm distributing my programs on YouTube, the internet, and that's about it. I don't have a huge audience. I don't have a large number of views. I don't have a large number of subscribers. So I am small peanuts to YouTube, but somehow, some way, they feel it's very, very important that they censor material from some small content creator like myself and not even let people see that, even if it's not going to affect the world like, say, a Joe Rogan would, or some of the other people that have been censored, like a Jordan Peterson and others with very widely listened to podcasts and very influential people. They're coming after me, someone who doesn't really affect their world much at all. And they're just going through and purging all the content from the internet as far as they're able to purge that doesn't follow their very narrow narrative about reality. They do it on the vaccines. They do it on COVID. They have a very strict and narrow definition of what you can say and what you can't say about COVID, the vaccines, about masks, about mandates. It's just a very, very narrow narrative. It's a propagandistic narrative. They're carrying the water for the Biden administration. We're seeing exactly happening what we've been warning about, and that is you have Biden's press secretary encouraging big tech, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of the major Spotify, big tech companies. They're encouraging them to censor out conservative voices. They're encouraging people to take down videos and podcasts and content that does not conform to the liberal leftist narrative. And this is propaganda. This is totalitarian tactics. We've seen this in Russia. We've seen this in the Soviet bloc countries. We see this in China right now. And now it's coming to the United States, and the leftists are using that, and they're not even hiding it. They're just coming right out and saying, okay, you can't talk about this subject because we don't like you to say that. You can't show this content because it doesn't follow our narrative. So they are trying to suppress voices that don't conform to their ideology. Well, I got caught up in this mess because I posted a book review. Here's the title of my recent post: book review of the 2020 election book, Rigged. Christian Answers, Pastor Jeff Short, number 390. So I posted that, and it was up for a couple weeks. And then I got this in the email: YouTube removed your content. So let's read further. Christian Answers. Our team has reviewed your content, and unfortunately, we think it violates our misinformation policy, where we've removed the following content from YouTube. Misinformation. So there's a book on the elections of 2020 written by a journalist, a credible journalist. Again, not a fringe persona, not a lunatic crazy, not some obscure person, not some white supremacist, not some white nationalist, a fairly rational, intellectual, conservative voice who has written a book that outlines how the Democrats won the election of 2020, the presidential race, and all of the, you might say, shenanigans that went into that victory. And I simply went chapter by chapter and reviewed the content of the book. That's all. I didn't go on any big rants and raves, and I wasn't raising my voice and acting crazy. I was simply reviewing the content of the book and encouraging people to read the book. And that seems to trigger YouTube. Any narrative that departs from the official, I guess, leftist liberal party line, any narrative that suggests that their guy might not have reached his official position because of a strict adherence to the law, they take down. And so here we go again. Last time it was COVID-19. This time it's the election of 2020, questioning the official leftist narrative of what happened then, and you get your content taken down. They don't want anyone to see your content. They don't want anyone to interact with your content. They want to control the entire information flow about the 2020 election. They say, we know that this might be disappointing. Yes, it is disappointing when censorship is coming to the United States. It's disappointing that a small content creator can be picked on by a huge tech giant and stomped out because he's not following the liberal leftist party line. Yes, that's very disappointing because people deserve to see both sides and they deserve to hear all the information and make up their own mind. And we are in America, for example, and we do have freedom of speech, but I guess at YouTube and these big tech companies, they say, well, wait a minute, we're a private company. You don't have freedom of speech. You can only talk about what we say you can talk about. You can only think about thoughts we think you should think about. You can only discuss topics that we think you should discuss. And if you don't follow our lead, we take you down. We take you off. So yes, it is disappointing. But it's important to us that YouTube is a safe place for all. Wait, are you saying that my discussion, my review of a book currently in publication, a new book just put out in 2022, are you telling me that my review of a book makes YouTube an unsafe place? Is that actually the argument? Can anyone in their sane mind, rational thinking, conclude that what I was doing by reviewing this book was making YouTube an unsafe place? That's ridiculous. This is an absurdity. And I think YouTube knows it, but they also know that there's nothing anyone can do about it. There's nothing that anyone can say. They own the platform and they are pulling their power and their right as a company, a private company. And if no one will stop them, they will do whatever they want and they will say whatever they want to say in rationalizing what they're doing. They are censoring people. They are violating free speech. This is not dangerous content, people. The book called Rigged is not a dangerous book. You may not like what it's implying. You may not like what it's saying. If so, you can disagree with it and you can bring forth your argument to counter Molly Hemingway's argument. But don't say it's a dangerous book. And don't say that my program as a book review of this book is making YouTube an unsafe place. That is a lie. That is false. And YouTube has no argument to say that my content is dangerous. That is a joke. If content breaks our rules, we remove it. If you think we've made a mistake, you can appeal and we'll take another look. Keep reading for more details. Well, here's the detail about this. If you appeal, you will most likely get another notice that says, we reject your appeal, your content is still taken down, and now you get another strike because you appealed. One more strike, and you will be taken off the channel. So what they're basically saying is, yeah, you can appeal it, but 99% of the chance you will fail in your appeal because it's so rigged. Now, if content breaks our rules, what are the rules? That's the problem. Are you saying now that we cannot discuss a newly released book by a credible journalist who uncovers election irregularities and problems with the 2020 election? Are you saying that we cannot talk about those kind of topics on YouTube because that harms someone or is unsafe for people? This kind of logic you would find in communist China, you would find in the old Soviet Union, but this is America, and you would expect more of companies that operate in America. They wouldn't try that. They wouldn't say that, like China right now is highly controlling the Olympics, and they're really totalitarian state. They're really throwing their power around as far as the rules, and they have all of these law enforcement people around, and then they have people called voluntary public health citizens. And these people are walking around looking for rule violations, and it's the totalitarian state that we know China is. But here in the United States, are we now headed for another totalitarian state, only some kind of a democratic totalitarian state where the winning side, I guess, who has power in Washington or in the state capitals, that power, that party in power can now become totalitarian? Is that what we want to say? Because that's what's happening right here. You have the Democratic Party, the liberal leftists, in lockstep now with big tech and the mainstream media, and they're all joining forces and saying, okay, we are going to flex our muscles and our power, and we're going to operate in a semi-totalitarian system. And we're going to remove the content of people we don't like. We don't like for them to say anything bad about Joe Biden. We don't want them to say anything about the mandates that we disagree with. We don't want them to say anything about the elections. And yet, for the better part of 4 years, Hillary Clinton, after 2016, after she lost, she spent the better part of that whole 4 years of the president claiming that the Russian government was somehow in collusion with the president. And as the investigation, as the Mueller report shows, as the evidence now that's been brought out shows that there was no collusion, there's no evidence for that, and it was a big hoax, the Steele dossier, and all of that was a fake. And yet, for the better part of 4 years, we were told by the mainstream media and the tech giants, and articles appeared on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, videos were made, all talking about Donald Trump and the Russian collusion hoax. Yet nothing was taken down, nothing was removed. But I guess you can question the election results if you're a Democrat, if you lose, but you can't question the election results if you're a Republican and you lose. So this double standard hypocrisy is really pretty clear. It's pretty obvious. Now let's go on. How your content violated the policy. Content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches change the outcome of the U.S. 2020 presidential election is not allowed on YouTube. So if you even hint that there was any problem with the 2020 election, like this book does, Molly Hemingway spends over 200 pages talking about how big tech, namely Facebook, spent $500 million in essentially setting up Democrats for a victory in 2020 by funding so-called volunteers and election activists to basically change election laws and make it so that it was easier for Democrats to vote, and not making it so easy for Republicans to vote in Republican precincts and so forth. And that's all widespread. We know that happened, but evidently you can't talk about it. You can't say anything about that because that's supposed to be misinformation. That's supposed to be false claims. Well, why don't you let people look at the evidence and decide for themselves if that's a false claim? Why don't you let people, let the citizens, let people talk about these things, present evidence, and look to see if there was fraud or error or glitches or whatever. You can't talk, you mean you can't talk about this whole topic? That's forbidden. That's off the table. You can't. That is such a totalitarian power grab that is not America. That is not this country. That is a violation of the freedom of speech. It's violation of freedom of press. And it doesn't matter if you're a private company. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google, these are not exactly only private companies. They are semi-public companies too. And when we see the government basically telling them you need to start censoring more, and seeing these companies actually follow through with that mandate or that command from the Biden administration, that is alarming. It says how this affects your channel. Your channel now has one strike. You won't be able to do things like upload, post, or live stream for 1 week. So they punish you. They want to get you conditioned to not post things that will offend them. And so you need to get into the right mindset. Talk about 1984. That's what they did. That's mind control. That's psychological and intellectual manipulation. You'll be scared. You'll be wondering, oh, is this going to be acceptable to YouTube? If I put this up, will I get a strike? If I get enough strikes, will they take my channel down? Will I lose my voice? So you begin to self-censor in your mind. And in the book 1984, the hero was given a proposition 2 + 2 = 5. You need to believe that. And he kept saying, no, 2 + 2 = 4. And then they would shock him or they would punish him until the point where he actually would say 2 + 2 = 5, just like you say. And so then they have forced conformity. Well, YouTube is doing the same thing. They're saying, yeah, you can post any of these things, but it'll be taken down. So you know what to do. You need to not post things like this. And don't even get close to the line that we've drawn, because then you might get taken down. A second strike will prevent you from publishing content for 2 weeks. 3 strikes in the same 90-day period will result in your channel being permanently removed. So they threaten. Now, if you're a big content creator and you actually monetize and you actually get a revenue stream from YouTube because of all of the views and the commercials that generate the content, the finances, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of content creators who actually make a living from YouTube revenue. And yeah, they're going to be blackmailed into basically saying, okay, YouTube, whatever you want. What to do next? 95% of creators who get one strike never get another one. Yeah, because they're super sensitive and they're self-censoring and they're being conditioned, behavioral conditioning it's called, to not get anywhere close to offending YouTube, this big tech giant. They don't want to poke the bear. We want that for you too. So please make sure you understand YouTube's community guidelines and strikes, even though they are very subjective, they're very undefined, and they're very unclear, and they can change. We saw that, for example, with the issue of the lab leak theory, that the virus might have come from a laboratory in China. When, after the pandemic broke out, if you began to talk about the lab leak theory, that maybe this was a created virus in the lab in China, Wuhan, China, there were times when the big tech companies would actually take down your videos, they would take down your posts, they would censor out all references to the lab leak theory. Well, all of a sudden, voila, about a year later, the mainstream media starts reporting on the possibility of the lab leak because the evidence started coming in. And all of a sudden, the tech giants started allowing you to actually talk about that now. So make sure you understand YouTube's community guidelines. You mean the ones that change all the time? Yeah, it's that one. Review your content with our policies in mind. Okay, self-censor. Learn the rules of YouTube. Don't say anything YouTube doesn't want you to say. Don't discuss anything YouTube doesn't want you to talk about. And then you won't be struck with a strike. If after reviewing your content you think we make a mistake, let us know. Lots of help that'll do. My first strike a year ago, I appealed to them, and less than 24 hours they just shot back a message. Nope, your strike stands. Now you have 2 because you challenged it. You can appeal this decision here. Right. You can appeal it technically, but practically speaking, they're not going to change it. Understand that this strike will expire after 90 days and that deleting the content will not remove the strike. Yeah, they've already deleted the content. Remember, if your channel has been restricted from using any YouTube features, you're prohibited from using another channel to get around these restrictions. Doing so is considered circumvention under our terms of service, may result in termination of your account and all your channels. So don't even try to talk about this topic on any other channel that you might have. Don't try to get around it, because we'll find it out and then we'll take you off the channel permanently. So this tech company is really threatening its content creators. You know, there once was a time when YouTube, you could talk about whatever was of interest to you. And you could talk about any political issue. You could talk about any religious issue. You could talk about any ideological issue or scientific issue. But during this pandemic period, seems like these big tech companies have taken advantage of the pandemic and started locking down conversations. Talk about lockdown. Lockdown is not just a term that's used to describe government shutting down the economy to stop the spread. It's also something you could use in reference to YouTube trying to take down content to lock out, you might call lockout discussion or lockout content about topics that they forbid you to talk about. This is nothing short of totalitarian. It's not American. And as Christians, we have to do our best to deal with a growing totalitarian culture. And we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more of this censorship, this shutting down people, ending debate, ending discussion. We're going to see more of the 1984 George Orwell scenario that he described in his book. And we have to be ready for it. Now, many YouTube content creators are going a route that I think I'm going to go, and that is you have a number of sources where you feed your content. YouTube, just one of them. And that way, I can post on YouTube the content that I'm pretty sure YouTube will not be offended by and will not remove it. And then the more things that YouTube doesn't like, or the narrative that doesn't fit YouTube's narrative, I will post on the other tech platforms that will let free speech and free discussion occur without censorship. So that's the way probably I will go in the future. I will begin to explore different avenues to put the content on different platforms and not just rely on one. Well, I hope this has been a helpful discussion. Unfortunately, this is coming to our country in greater degrees, and it's a sad thing. We need to pray that God intervenes and helps freedom reign. Talk to you next week. God bless.